When we think of transportation, the most common thought that pops in our minds has to do with how people get around from point A to point B. But we tend to forget the unsung heroes that keep our economics moving. Semi-truck drivers, cargo ship captains, train conductors, and cargo jet pilots. Whether they're moving heavy machinery to build a home or transporting the world's goods across international territories, without these people, the world economy would surely fail. But, as with any industry, human error or negligence are always in the equation. When it comes to people using machines, there will always be a chance for disaster. Maybe it's in the form of a mechanical failure. Maybe it's in the form of operator error. Whatever it is, such failures can end up costing companies lots of money, and in some instances, force global trade to come to a standstill. Here are 5 massive transport operations that went horribly wrong. If you enjoy this video, then be sure to subscribe to Underworld to see more videos just like it. One of the most important methods of transportation in terms of international trade and commerce is by sea. Huge cargo ships carrying thousands of crates of cargo each traverse the world's oceans on a daily basis. But, as the ships often have to sail to destinations where they must navigate around huge land masses and continents, a shorter and more direct route is required. Connecting the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea is the Suez Canal, one of the most crucial shipping lanes in the world since it was first opened for navigation all the way back in 1869. On March 21, 2021, a large cargo ship named the Evergreen was going through the canal towards the Mediterranean Sea when the captain accidentally maneuvered the ship in a way that caused the ship to become wedged between the two shores, completely blocking the canal and causing a backup of ships for 5 days. What to many may have seemed like minor inconvenience quickly turned into international news. Stations all over the world covered the event as fear of the impact on global trade loomed overhead. It's important for us to give you an idea of exactly how big of a deal this was and why. Pictures may not do it justice, but the Evergreen ship is actually one of the largest container ships in the entire world. In fact, it is the same length and almost the same width as the HMM Algeciras, the actual largest container ship on Earth. So, it took a lot to get it stuck, and even more to get it unstuck. During these 5 days, there was a traffic jam of more than 360 ships who all had to wait in the Red Sea or the Mediterranean Sea until the Evergreen was freed by tugboats and dredges. The 120-mile-long canal carries 10 to 12% of the world's commercial shipping and about 2.5% of the world's oil. Some estimates of the financial damages show that for each week that the canal is blocked, global trade could suffer $6 to $10 billion. Remember, that is per week. Surely the Evergreen disaster now ranks among the costliest shipping mistakes in history. Ship captains have an incredibly important job, and that is to know the waters in which they are sailing. Yes, this job involves an in-depth knowledge of tides and weather, but there's way more going on. Lurking just under the surface of the water could lie a sandbar or some type of reef. It is why ships adhere to a strict path, leading them away from the easily overlooked hazards that the water hides. On Wednesday, October 5, 2011, at 2:20 a.m., the cargo ship MV Rena was sailing from Napier to Tauranga, New Zealand. The captain, unaware of his exact position in the water, struck the Astrolabe Reef off the Bay of Plenty. The ship, loaded with 1,368 containers, including 8 which held hazardous material, was unable to move. A gash in the hull led to an oil leak, which would eventually be dubbed New Zealand's worst ecological disaster ever. As the ship stayed stuck on the reef, strong winds and powerful currents put enormous amounts of stress on the ship. A large crack had formed, causing rescuers and salvage experts to fear that the ship may break apart, furthering the environmental disaster. Within 2 weeks, the ship did in fact break into 2 pieces, held together only by her internal structure in the reef itself. Eventually, within a few more weeks, the stern section finally slipped below the waves, taking with it much of the containers on board. In the end, 2 were jailed for the disaster, and cleanup efforts were estimated at over $100 million. Oil is one of the most valuable resources that our planet has to offer. We rely on it for a multitude of reasons, but mainly for operating all sorts of vehicles, from cars to airplanes. But in order to get the oil and petrol to different locations, it takes massive tankers of all sorts. Ships, trains, huge semi-trucks, all of these move the oil to their destinations. The most common thing that we as regular people see are the large tanker trucks driving down the highways. However, these trucks are always at high risk for disaster, as one false move could turn the truck into an enormous fireball. Such was the case on August 26, 2004, in North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany, on the Wiehltal Bridge. That morning, a car collided with a tanker truck as they were both crossing the bridge. The truck was carrying more than 32,000 liters of gasoline. This impact was more than just a crash. The force generated by the car caused the truck to strike the guardrail. Now, these rails were only designed to stop vehicles that weighed up to 13 tons, so they couldn't stop the truck. It ended up breaking through the guardrail, falling about 90 feet to the ground below, and exploding. Such was the force of this blast that it actually destroyed the load-bearing ability of the bridge above. As this was the Autobahn, tens of thousands of cars drove over it every day. The risk to life was great. So the bridge was closed so that provisional repairs could be made. Although the repairs were eventually made, a replacement bridge would eventually be built. The entire disaster ended up costing over 250 million euros. In terms of safety, trains have a much better track record than other methods of transportation. It is because of this fact that trains are chosen to transport much more dangerous chemicals such as ammonia, chlorine, acids, and other caustic substances. But even though trains are less dangerous, when they do get into accidents, the damage is usually much worse. In early 2020, a train was traveling through the Georgia countryside, pulling along some hazardous chemicals such as ammonia and various types of acid. Even though the journey seemed to be going well, the train was headed for disaster. Prior to departure, the train cars had been hooked up in an improper fashion, creating too much slack between them. This fault made the cars very susceptible to flipping over, which is exactly what happened when the train was rounding a turn. In total, 38 cars ended up derailing. The chemicals were all spilled, but ruled to not be a threat to the surrounding community. In total, the accident cost more than $5 million to clean up, which was all taken care of by the train company, Norfolk Southern. On March 21, 2006, the cargo vessel Hyundai Fortune left a port in China en route for Europe. It was going to be a long journey that would take the ship around the coast of Yemen and through the Suez Canal, but the ship would never end up making it to its destination. At around 12:35 UTC, a powerful explosion rocked the ship, startling crew. The shockwave from the blast knocked between 60 and 90 containers into the ocean below. Due to the size of the blast, a fire broke out on board, which quickly spread and caused secondary explosions from fireworks that were being transported in containers on deck. The crew attempted to manage the blaze, but were unable to do so, and eventually abandoned ship and were rescued. On March 23rd, firefighting tugboats arrived and spent days putting out the large blaze. Eventually, the ship was towed to Oman, where officials could assess the damages. Luckily, they were able to save 2,249 of the containers on board, which were quickly offloaded and sent to Europe. The total costs associated with just the lost cargo alone are estimated to be over $800 million. The cause of the blast was determined to be petroleum-based cleaning fluids that were being stored near the engine room. Somewhere along the chain of command, an official failed to indicate the hazardous chemicals. Some speculate this was to avoid paying extra fees. Once all was said and done, the ship was repaired in China and put back to use before being scrapped in 2018. These various forms of transportation are essential for us to live. However, there are so many risks that are posed between the sheer number of vehicles in constant use and the often volatile cargo they carry. Luckily, they are also under strict safety measures, making it highly unlikely that these disasters will ever be a regular thing. To see another video of ours just like this one, be sure to click the link on screen now. And with that, Thanks for watching, and tune in next time.